The first contact came on a gray morning, the sky a uniform sheet of dull silver. At first, the ships appeared as silent shadows breaking through the clouds, their sleek, angular forms glinting ominously as they descended. They hovered over cities and oceans, monumental and terrifying. The world watched in stunned silence as the alien craft blotted out the sun in some places, casting vast swaths of land into shadow. Major Lena Carr stood at the edge of a makeshift military command center outside what remained of Chicago. The city had been evacuated, its streets eerily silent save for the hum of alien surveillance drones. Through her binoculars, she studied the nearest alien vessel, which loomed above the skyscrapers like a silent predator. Her second-in-command, Sergeant Andrew Hall, approached with a clipboard, an archaic tool for archaic times. "Satellite recon confirms their primary landing zones," he said, his voice steady but tinged with unease. "They're spreading fast, establishing strongholds. Civilians are reporting they're taking samples. Resources, biology, everything. They're treating Earth like a buffet." Lena lowered the binoculars. "And we're the leftovers," she muttered, half to herself. The aliens, self-designated as the Trezzen, had sent no diplomats, no messages of peace. Their arrival was an invasion wrapped in silence. They moved with precision, deploying metallic constructs, quadrupedal war machines, and humanoid soldiers encased in exoskeletons, while their ships hovered untouchable in the sky. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's, sleek and efficient, as if designed to mock Earth's clunky tanks and primitive jets. At first, resistance had been futile. Nations that tried to stand their ground were swatted aside like flies. Entire battalions had been vaporized by weapons that reduced steel and flesh alike into charred nothingness. But as the days stretched into weeks, humanity proved less fragile than the Trezzen had anticipated. "Think they expected us to roll over and die?" Hall asked, his expression grim as he handed Lena a tablet. It displayed satellite images of human resistance fighters ambushing an alien patrol in rural France. The Trezzen's gleaming constructs had been dismantled with homemade explosives and a dose of reckless courage. "No," Lena said, tapping the screen to zoom in on the aftermath. "I think they thought we'd break. But we're a stubborn species." Elsewhere, the alien commander Arzik stalked through the interior of his ship, a place of cold luminescence and humming machinery. The Trezzen were a race of precision and logic, their decisions dictated by probabilities and calculated outcomes. To them, humanity was a backwater anomaly, a primitive species on a planet brimming with untapped resources. Arzik had initially found Earthlings fascinating, like insects building intricate colonies with their crude tools. But fascination had quickly soured into irritation. The humans were unpredictable. They fought without patterns, striking where they were weakest instead of strongest, undermining efficiency with sheer chaos. "Explain this," Arzik demanded, his voice cold and clipped. He gestured toward a translucent screen displaying footage of a failed skirmish in the Amazon. Trezzen soldiers, clad in impenetrable armor, had been routed by humans wielding nothing more advanced than explosives and sharpened spears. One of his lieutenants, a thinner and younger Trezzen named Veckrel, stepped forward. "The humans exploit terrain with remarkable effectiveness," Veckrel explained, his tone almost reluctant. "They adapt to our strategies faster than anticipated." Arzik narrowed his eyes. "Adaptation is one thing. Victory is another. How does a species without hyperspectral targeting or plasma shielding best us in open combat?" Veckrel hesitated before responding. "They have an illogical resilience, Commander. They fight as if the odds don't matter, as if defeat is unacceptable." Arzik's gaze hardened. "Then they are fools, and fools are crushed." Back on the ground, Lena and her team were anything but crushed. In the face of overwhelming odds, humanity's ingenuity shone brightest. Radio reports filtered in from across the globe, makeshift victories in forests, deserts, and cities. Farmers in rural America had turned agricultural drones into kamikaze devices. Engineers in Tokyo had hacked alien surveillance networks. Fishermen in the Pacific had destroyed an alien aquatic drone with nothing but a harpoon and dynamite. The Trezzen were not invincible. And for Lena, every small triumph was a step toward survival. "They're going to hit us harder now," Hall said, as Lena pored over a map of the Midwest. "Every victory makes them angrier. More focused." "That's fine," Lena replied, her voice steely. "Let them focus. They could bring their best. We'll still outthink them." Even as she said the words, Lena knew the cost. The resistance was losing people faster than it could replace them. Supplies were dwindling. Morale hung by a thread in some sectors. Yet, every time she looked into the eyes of her team, she saw the same fire she felt within herself. On the Trezzen mothership, Arzik was learning to fear that fire. Reports from his soldiers described humans as relentless, unpredictable, and maddeningly resourceful. They set traps that no algorithm could predict, used weapons cobbled together from junkyards, and fought as if each skirmish were a personal vendetta. Arzik clenched his fists as he reviewed yet another battlefield report. A squad of Trezzen soldiers had been ambushed in the Rocky Mountains, their corpses discovered hanging upside down from the trees. A message to the invaders. "Commander," Veckrel said cautiously, "perhaps we underestimated the psychological aspects of this conflict. The humans are not merely defending resources. They are defending identity." "Identity," Arzik echoed with disdain. "A primitive concept. They are animals driven by instinct." Veckrel said nothing, though his silence carried the weight of doubt. On the ground, Lena's team prepared for their next move. They had intercepted Trezzen communications, hinting at a supply convoy passing through an abandoned highway. It was an opportunity too good to ignore. Lena watched her team load their weapons, scavenge rifles, grenades fashioned from scrap metal, and other implements of desperate warfare. She thought of her family, evacuated to the countryside, and the millions of others counting on people like her to fight. "We don't need to beat them everywhere," she said, addressing her team. "We just need to make them bleed. Make them realize this planet isn't worth the fight." Her words were met with grim nods and a quiet determination that spoke louder than cheers ever could. As the convoy approached under the cover of night, Lena's heart pounded in her chest. The Trezzen soldiers moved with mechanical precision, their glowing armor cutting through the darkness. But they were walking into a trap. When the first explosion erupted, the aliens reacted with swift, calculated movements. Yet for all their technology, they could not match the humans' ferocity. The ambush was over in minutes, the alien convoy reduced to smoking wreckage. As Lena surveyed the aftermath, she allowed herself a rare smile. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, it felt like humanity might have a chance. The night was quiet, save for the rustle of leaves and the cold wind. Lena crouched in the underbrush, her breath visible in the moonlight, her hand wrapped tightly around a makeshift radio. Around her, the remnants of her team lay hidden, eyes sharp and weapons ready. They had been tracking the Trezzen patrol for hours, their movements slow and deliberate. The alien squad marched through the valley below, their luminous exoskeletons casting eerie reflections on the damp ground. Hall, positioned a few meters to Lena's right, whispered into his own radio. 5 soldiers. Standard formation. 2 drones flanking. They look relaxed, overconfident. Lena studied the aliens through her binoculars. Their gait was mechanical, their movements synchronized with a precision that seemed almost choreographed. For all their technology, there was an unsettling coldness to them, a sense that they were less an army and more a machine. "Wait for the signal," she murmured into her radio. Every second felt stretched to its limit. The aliens advanced, oblivious to the humans watching them from the shadows. Hall's earlier observation wasn't wrong. These soldiers moved as if they had nothing to fear. To them, Earth was a conquered world, and its defenders little more than gnats buzzing at the edges of their victory. Lena knew better. The first drone passed directly beneath her position. It was sleek and compact, a near-silent scout equipped with sensors that could detect movement or heat from kilometers away. But its creators had not accounted for human ingenuity. A crackling sound broke the silence. The drone jerked violently as a net of high-voltage wires dropped onto it from a nearby tree. The device spasmed for a moment before collapsing to the ground, its lights extinguished. The aliens froze, their formation tightening instinctively. Another drone spun toward the source of the disturbance, scanning. Now, Lena whispered. The valley erupted into chaos. Homemade explosives hidden along the trail detonated, sending shrapnel flying through the air. The aliens reacted quickly, their armor absorbing much of the blast, but the attack had disrupted their cohesion. Hall and the others opened fire from the ridge, their bullets tearing through the weak points in the aliens' armor, joints, visors, the undersides of limbs. For all their advancements, the Trezzen were not invincible, and Lena's team had spent weeks studying every vulnerability. The aliens returned fire, their weapons emitting bursts of blue energy that vaporized anything they touched. Trees exploded into splinters, rocks melted into slag, and the air crackled with heat. Lena fired her rifle, her shots precise and methodical. She didn't aim to kill outright. She aimed to confuse, to distract, to disrupt. Around her, her team followed suit, their tactics more about creating chaos than engaging in a traditional firefight. One of the aliens broke from the formation, charging up the ridge with an energy blade humming in its hand. Lena dropped her rifle, drawing a machete from her belt. She met the alien head-on, dodging its first strike and driving the blade into the exposed wiring at its neck. Sparks erupted as the creature fell, its body twitching. By the time the smoke cleared, the Trezzen squad lay scattered across the valley, their glowing armor dimmed. Hall emerged from the underbrush, panting. That went better than expected. Lena nodded, though her eyes remained on the horizon. They'll send reinforcements. We need to move. As the team gathered their gear, Lena felt the weight of their situation settle over her. Each victory came with a cost. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Miles away, aboard a Trezzen command ship, Arzik studied a holographic display of the skirmish. His jaw tightened as he watched the humans dismantle his squad with tactics that defied logic. Another patrol lost, Veckrel reported, his tone cautious. This makes the 5th this week. Arzik didn't respond immediately. His golden eyes remained fixed on the replay, analyzing every movement, every decision. The humans fought like no species he had ever encountered. They didn't rely on strength or technology. They relied on ingenuity, adaptability, and an almost reckless disregard for their own survival. Commander? Veckrel prompted. They fight as if they have nothing to lose, Arzik said finally. Perhaps they don't, Veckrel offered. Arzik turned sharply to face his lieutenant. Every species has something to lose. Territory, resources, honor. The humans must be no different. And yet, Veckrel replied carefully, they seem to value defiance over survival. The words lingered in the air, unsettling Arzik more than he cared to admit. He dismissed Veckrel with a curt gesture, returning his attention to the display. There was something about the humans, something he couldn't fully understand, and that made them dangerous. Back on Earth, Lena's team had retreated to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of a small town. The building reeked of rust and mildew, but it offered shelter and a place to regroup. As they debriefed, Hall spread a map across a table, marking their position and the location of the next known Trezzen patrols. We're running out of time, he said. Their reinforcements are getting heavier. They're adapting to us. They think they're adapting, Lena countered. They still don't understand how we fight. They keep trying to apply logic to chaos. Hall raised an eyebrow. You're saying we're chaotic? I'm saying we're unpredictable. And that's our greatest strength. The room fell quiet for a moment as the team absorbed her words. It wasn't an inspiring speech, but it didn't need to be. They all understood the stakes. As the team prepared for their next mission, Lena stepped outside, the night air cool against her skin. She looked up at the sky, where the faint outline of a Trezzen ship glimmered in the distance. They're watching us, Hall said, joining her. Good, Lena replied. Let them watch. Let them see what we can do. The faint hum of the alien ship lingered as they stood in silence, two figures against the vastness of the night. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, Lena felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope! The Trezzen ship loomed over the desert, casting an enormous shadow across the cracked, sun-bleached earth. The air shimmered with heat and tension as Commander Arzik stood at the helm of the central command chamber, staring at a projection of Earth. His golden eyes flicked to a highlighted region pulsing red, a region where his forces had suffered yet another humiliating defeat. The humans had not simply resisted, they had embarrassed the Trezzen. Patrols had been lured into traps, their advanced weaponry turned against them, their supplies stolen or sabotaged. Worse, whispers had begun to spread among the troops. They feared the humans not for their strength, but for their ingenuity. Vekril stood at attention, his face betraying his unease as Arzik paced the chamber. "Commander, another outpost has gone silent. Reports suggest an ambush. The humans are using methods we cannot predict." Arzik stopped, his gaze cold and sharp. "Methods you cannot predict. What you call chaos, I call failure of analysis. Adaptation. That is what we must master." He turned toward the hologram, gesturing sharply. A new display materialized. Images of human fighters scavenging wreckage, turning debris into weapons. Their eyes burned with something the Trezzen could not quantify. "They are not merely fighting for survival," Arzik said, his voice low and controlled. "They are fighting for meaning, for identity. They make this war personal." Vekril hesitated before speaking. "If I may, Commander, it seems that is their strength. To us, this is a calculated campaign. To them, it is life or death. They fight as though their very souls are at stake." Arzik's expression darkened. "Souls." He spat the word with disdain. "Another primitive concept. Yet they use it well." Far below, in the dry heat of the desert, Lena Carr crouched behind a sand dune, her rifle slung over her shoulder. Her team was smaller now. Many had fallen in recent weeks, but the fire in their eyes remained. Beside her, Hall wiped sweat from his brow, scanning the horizon. "The supply convoy is late," he muttered. "They'll come," Lena replied, her voice steady. "They always do. And when they came, it would be another battle of grit against technology, of human audacity against alien precision." Lena didn't relish the fighting. Every skirmish chipped away at her team's numbers and morale, but she knew they couldn't stop. Each victory sent a message. Earth would not surrender. Minutes stretched into an hour before the convoy appeared. A column of sleek, metallic vehicles gliding across the sand, escorted by a dozen Trezzen soldiers. Their armor gleamed under the relentless sun, and the hum of their weapons carried on the wind. Lena signaled to her team, and they spread out, taking positions. She could feel the weight of the moment, the tension thick in the air. The convoy was a tempting target, laden with supplies the resistance desperately needed. But it was also bait, a trap designed to lure them out. She didn't care. Traps work both ways. The first explosion ripped through the sand, flipping one of the vehicles onto its side. The Trezzen reacted instantly, their soldiers fanning out within human precision, their weapons scanning for targets. But Lena's team didn't attack head-on. They struck from the shadows, using the dunes as cover, their gunfire sporadic and unpredictable. Every shot was deliberate, meant to confuse and divide. Hall took down a drone with a single, well-placed shot. Another team member, a wiry teenager named Sam, used a slingshot to launch an explosive device into the midst of the convoy. The blast sent 2 Trezzen soldiers sprawling, their armor scorched. For all their training and technology, the aliens struggled to adapt. The humans didn't fight like any opponent they had encountered. They didn't follow patterns or rules. They fought with instinct and ingenuity, with desperation and determination. Lena moved through the chaos like a shadow, her rifle barking in short bursts. She took down one soldier, then another, aiming for the joints in their armor. She had learned to conserve her ammunition. Every bullet counted. The tide turned slowly, the convoy descending into disarray. But the Trezzen were nothing if not resilient. Reinforcements arrived within minutes, sleek aerial drones descending from the sky, their plasma weapons lighting up the battlefield. Lena gritted her teeth, signaling her team to fall back. They couldn't win this fight outright, not with the reinforcements. But they didn't need to win. They just needed to make the aliens bleed. As they retreated, Hall covered their flank, taking down another drone before it could fire. "We can't keep this up forever," he said, his voice strained. "I know," Lena replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "But we can't stop either." They fell back to an abandoned outpost hidden in the dunes, their breathing heavy, their faces streaked with sweat and grime. Despite the losses, they had taken down several vehicles and soldiers, and they had captured valuable supplies. But the cost was high. 2 more of their team had fallen, their bodies left behind in the sand. Lena felt the weight of their absence like a stone in her chest, but she couldn't afford to dwell on it. The fight wasn't over. Back aboard the Trezin ship, Arzik reviewed the latest battle report, his expression grim. The humans had struck again, and while their losses were significant, they had inflicted enough damage to disrupt the convoy's mission. "They retreat, but they do not surrender," Veckrel observed. "They retreat to fight another day," Arzik corrected. "They understand the value of endurance. A primitive strategy, but effective." Veckrel hesitated, then spoke cautiously. "Perhaps we underestimated them not because of their weapons or their tactics, but because of their mindset. They fight not to win, but to survive. And survival is a powerful motivator." Arzik didn't respond immediately. He stared at the hologram, his mind racing. For the first time, he felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. It wasn't fear. Trezin commanders did not fear. But it was close. Lena sat by a campfire, the flames casting flickering shadows across her face. Around her, her team rested, their silence heavy with exhaustion and loss. She looked at each of them, seeing the weight they carried, the sacrifices they had made. "We'll hit them again," she said softly, her voice carrying over the crackle of the fire. "We'll keep hitting them until they realize this planet isn't worth the fight." Hall nodded, his gaze steady. "And if they don't?" Lena met his eyes, her expression hard but resolute. "Then we'll show them what happens when you back humanity into a corner." Above them, the stars sparkled in the vast expanse of the sky, indifferent to the war unfolding below. But to Lena and her team, those stars represented something more, something worth fighting for. The Trezin thought they could break humanity with superior technology and tactics. They hadn't yet learned the truth. Humanity didn't break. It adapted.